Hey again everybody, Canacentric Films here, and I'm back at you with another flower review. Today I've got my hands on some Heady Betty flower from Cresco. This is another newer release from them, and it is actually a phenotype of Mac number 7. We did check out Mac number 7 from Cresco in the past. You should check that video out, especially if you're interested in sort of the idea of shelf life in cannabis. That specific video was more of a deep dive and discussion on shelf life because that was some pretty old bud. And if you go back and watch that video, you'll notice some similarities in the structure and the way these buds look in terms of this Heady Betty versus that Mac 7 being sister phenotypes. But at the same time, that Mac number 7 was way more oxidized because of being a lot older. So I think that is worth noting. But with all that considered, I think this is the Floracal cut of Mac number 7. My basis for thinking that is when you look at some of the other newer cultivars on the Floracal website, they have one called Macaroon, and that is a cross of the Floracal cut of Mac and Italian Ice. Now, we saw Mac number 7 times Italian Ice appear in the Sonata, which I have not reviewed from Cresco, but I've seen a lot of other people review it. So I'm thinking that just might be another name or another phenotype for that cultivar. So that's why I think Mac number 7 is most likely the Floracal cut of Mac. If anyone knows that for sure or can definitively dispute that, I'd be curious. But I always am interested in checking out different genetics and these types of conversations about genetics. So thank you for indulging me, anyone who does. With all that considered, let's give this Heady Betty a look. I think this stuff looks pretty good overall. It's got relative density to it that is reminiscent of its Mac lineage. And same thing with the coloration, sort of that sandy encrusting of trichomes. Definitely some brighter greens in this one than compared to the Mac 7, and also some vibrant purple in there. Definitely has a lot of Mac reminiscence in its look. Overall, the smell doesn't really remind me of what I consider the Mac terpene profile. I get a much more Jack Herrera hazy type note. It kind of reminds me of the mac and cheese from Revolution. So maybe some other Mac cultivars or other phenotypes of Mac can dominate in that sort of hazy type note. That sort of makes sense with the Colombian influence as well. Just a thought, but I think this stuff smells good overall. It's not absolutely 10 out of 10 loud, but you're getting a good hint of that hazy, I would guess terpinolene rich type aroma. A lot of cultivars that are rich in terpinolene seem to have this type of aroma. A lot of the hazes, like I talk about all the time on this channel, it's one of the most frequent terpene profiles we come across, especially in the Illinois market, but in general in cannabis, it's very abundant. Not as much woodsiness in this one, a little bit more of the limey, sort of candied citrus note. Smells good, just not my cup of tea in terms of terp profile, but I will say with this stuff, it did smell the same post-breakdown. A little bit of mustiness comes out as well. It was more of just an increased volume of aroma, if that makes sense. The smell didn't really evolve too much, so that marks a few pickups from Cresco where I've noticed the smell you're getting right when you open the jar is pretty much the smell you get post-breakdown. Maybe save for a little bit of increase in the level of aroma that you're getting. I kind of like to see that in the bud. To me, that tells me that they're curing the bud a little bit more properly if it's retaining sort of that full terpene profile as soon as you open the jar. To me, that's a good sign that there's a little bit more preservation of the terpene content. I would say it's possible the grow itself didn't lend itself to the absolute maximum of terpene content in terms of most aromatic cultivars I've smelled. This stuff wasn't like life-changingly loud, like I said, but the aroma was pleasant, and it was sort of the full terpene profile you were going to get post-breakdown, save for maybe a little bit of extra mustiness that comes out on the breakdown. So to me, because there's that lack of a bitterness, a lack of a grassiness that we've encountered in a lot of less ideally cured Cresco cultivars, I'm led to believe the aroma indicates that this stuff is definitely more properly dried and cured in this case, and it was a little bit externally dry, I will say that, but post-breakdown, there's definitely some moisture retained. It's not sand-like, it's not incredibly sticky either, but it was definitely a workable consistency and a pretty uniform breakdown. Not a whole lot of internal stemminess. With these being denser buds, there was kind of a central, thicker stem in between each of these buds, but overall it wasn't all that stem abundant, which is good to see. A lot of smokable flower material, and I will say in this case, on sort of a rare instance, that hazy kind of terpene profile did translate to flavor. It was a pretty good flavor overall, kind of a earthy, definitely a liminess going on, and that haze influence. like I said, it's rare to me that haze smell translates to flavor, but in this case it did. And interestingly, it kind of reminds me of eating raw carrots. There's sort of a flavor there it's a little bit earthy, but there's something more to it. It's almost earthy mixed with like menthol licorice, something along those lines. But that's what the flavor reminds me of, in addition to that hazy citrus nuance. The smoke was pretty smooth with this stuff, and I will say objectively it was very light ashing. That doesn't mean all that much to me, but I can say that if you connect the dots, it seems like it was pretty properly dried and cured and sort of taken care of post-harvest. So the smoke was considerably better than a lot of other stuff I've had from Cresco. It's a pretty solid smoke overall, and I didn't really have any issues. It didn't give me too much of a tingly feeling in the throat, not too much unwanted harshness. So I was happy with the smoke. And I would say overall it's sort of a slow onset in terms of the high. I wasn't immediately affected. It took a few minutes for it to set in, but as more time elapsed post-smoke with this stuff, I found a real stony sort of couch lock type element to this stuff. Not couch lock in the fact that I felt super sedated and tired, but I was just drawn into media and sucked into my phone, reading articles, reading books and stuff like that. I was able to be a lot more still. I'm someone who's always on the go, and I have a hard time taking a step back and being relaxed, and this stuff definitely helped with that. I've found that to be the case with a lot of Mac cultivars. The high is really paramount from that cultivar, honestly. One of my favorite kinds of highs really has an anti-anxiety element to me, and not a lot of cannabis can do that for me personally. Most of the time, if there's something I'm really preoccupied with, cannabis does nothing to hide that from me. It only makes that more prominent in my mind, and that can make for a lot more anxiety. I think it's a combination of being in the right circumstances, but I would say with this stuff, there wasn't too much of that unwanted, racy, paranoid, anxious feeling. And it didn't really amplify negative feelings for me. It did more to relax and make me more carefree, which I really appreciated. Not a lot of cultivars do that for me. That wasn't necessarily what I was expecting from this one, just given the terpene profile, but let that be a lesson that two cultivars can smell very similarly and still have a very different combination of cannabinoids and terpenes and all the other things inside the cannabis plant that will make the effects very different. With all that considered, that's pretty much my experience with this Heady Betty. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Let me know if you've tried this one. What were your thoughts on it? Have you tried the Max 7 cultivar? Did you get a similar hazy, sort of Jack Herrera reminiscent terpene profile? I certainly didn't when I tried it, but it was very old, so I didn't get much of a terpene profile at all from that Max 7. So I'm curious if anyone had a differing experience. Stay safe, everyone.